Hello everybody and welcome to this ARC conference showcase video, Getting to Grips with Productivity in Ethnic Minority Businesses, an Action Research Study. And with me here today is Professor Monder Ram, the Professor of Small Business at Aston University and also Director of the Centre for Research in Ethnic Minority Entrepreneurship. I've also got with me here Dr. Imelda McCarthy, an occupational psychologist and research fellow at CRÈME. Hello and welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Hi, Meryl.
Hi. So I'm going to get straight on with the questions here. So could you please, first of all, give me an overview of the research being carried out at CRÈME at the moment and how that links to boosting innovation and productivity? And Imelda, if I could ask you to take that one.
Sure. So CRÈME specialises in research on small and ethnic minority businesses. Now today we're going to talk about a really innovative project that we're working on that aims to develop productivity boosting interventions to support ethnic minority and micro businesses. So micro businesses are businesses with between 1 and 9 employees. So they're very small, and our focus is on the catering, creative and retail sector. Now, what's novel about this project is that we're working very closely with practitioner partners to help address this question. Our practitioner partners are the Bangladeshi network. They represent the catering sector. We also have Punch Records, which is a business with a strong social mission to promote artists from diverse backgrounds. We work also with Citizens UK, who are a national civil society alliance with links to the retail sector, and also Ashley Community Housing, which is an award-winning social enterprise with a keen interest in diaspora entrepreneurship. Now, as part of this project, we want to understand what productivity really means. There's been a lot of hype around this topic, but nobody really has a clear understanding of what productivity is. So what we want to do, we want to extract this knowledge and also make good use of it. And we think this is an excellent opportunity for the CIPD to support a segment of the business community that's been missed.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. Thank you, Imelda. Now over to you, Monder. Could you tell me a little bit about why you've pursued this particular area of research and talk about some of the methodologies that you're using to try and find out about productivity with those ethnic minority businesses?
Well, Meryl, 3 things come to mind. The first is the really puzzling neglect of a really critical segment of the small business population, and that's micro businesses. There are over 1 million micro businesses in the UK, and they sort of constitute almost 90% of the small business population. Yet we know very little about them, despite the fact that they employ around 20% of private sector employees. They contribute around 55 billion to our coffers, so the economy's coffers, and that's a huge amount. And yet we know very little about them. People talk about small firms, but micro businesses, that is sort of businesses between 1 and 9, are curiously overlooked. And they're overlooked by academics. Imelda's quite rightly said that when we talk about productivity, we don't actually know what it means per se. But you talk to small business owners, and they'll give you a bewildering answer, bewildering and really diverse, mixed answers on this question: what is productivity? No one knows actually what it means in the small business context, and that issue or that puzzle is amplified in the concept of micro businesses. Micro businesses are often family businesses, and they've got social as well as economic objectives. So what does productivity mean in that context? So they're overlooked by academics, but they're equally overlooked by practitioners. Practitioners in business support agencies are really fixated about growth companies, adding sort of employees to the number of workers in a firm. But our economy is largely constituted by micro businesses, and so practitioners are overlooking this massively important segment of the small business market. And the third reason why we did it was because the philosophy of our centre. Our centre, the Centre for Research in Ethnic Minority Entrepreneurship, has a track record of doing research on work in small firms, particularly ethnic minority firms, but we're equally interested in helping practitioners too. And that leads me to the question about methodology. What's really distinctive about this project, Meryl, is our methodological approach. Of course, we want to do the academic job, which is to understand, get a better academic understanding of what productivity means for micro businesses, but we actually want to do something about it. So we use an approach called critical engagement. The critical means applying concepts, but the engagement means working alongside practitioners to utilize that knowledge to make a difference. So we're going to be working with business support agencies, and crucially, as part of our project, we're actually going to put on an intervention to support micro businesses who are taking part in our project.
Brilliant. That sounds fascinating. As somebody who's supported micro businesses for many years, it's refreshing to see that there is something actually specifically for them. That's great. So, and I'm also aware that you've got some early results. So Imelda, could you share with us some of the emerging themes and findings, please?
Sure, yes. So in our conversations with these micro businesses, we're seeing that there's a definite interest in addressing this productivity challenge, which is a contrast to what policymakers and academics have been previously saying. Micro businesses are interested, and they've been kind of highly responsive in terms of the conversations that they've had with us and engaged in our suggestions for action. Now, this has also been partly due to the good relationships that we have with our practitioner partners, who have been important allies and trusted intermediaries in helping us gain access to these firms who would be otherwise maybe neglected or overlooked. Now, one of the key things that we found is that productivity means different things depending upon the context. So in this project, we're looking at the creative, retail and catering sector. So some of the kind of early findings that we're finding is that in the creative sector, it's about cultivating oneself as an artist, and that's just as important as making money is. Within the retail sector, it's a lot about social contribution, so providing employment for family and members of the community. That's a key indicator of your productivity. Likewise, in the catering sector, we see there's a lot of informality and intuitiveness around the process of productivity. We see this in terms of how dishes are priced, how meals and recipes are created. That kind of informalness really predominates. So as part of the research process, and we're very much in the early days of this project, we want to build a kind of more detailed picture, but we can already see that engagement starting to happen, and we've supported some of the micro businesses in terms of support. So some of our creatives have been on a leadership development training program. Some of our caterers have engaged in digital marketing training as there's a kind of push towards digital and e-commerce markets for that particular sector. And also in our retail communities, we see that actually people working in shops, they might be working in their silos, but there's a kind of call for more peer support. So we've been kind of instrumental in supporting that too. And as the project advances, we'll be kind of continuing to develop more formal packages support later in the project. Now, some of the kind of key kind of messages that we want to kind of express as a result of this is that, yes, productivity is something that's very much context dependent. So we can't kind of capture it as a kind of umbrella term, that it actually means different things to different people depending upon where you're operating. One of the key things we also want to highlight is that some of these micro businesses have been very much disregarded in terms of support, but there's a willingness from them to engage in support. So that's something to be taken into account. Again, there's real potential for CIPD and others to get involved in opening up these new markets to HR support and really embedding a kind of human management, people management agenda into the micro business sector.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Imelda. And what impact has COVID had on your work? Because I think particularly some of the micro businesses have really suffered in COVID. You know, they've fallen between often some of the stools of funding and support. So has that been your finding when working with these micros during the pandemic?
Well, Meryl, initially we thought the impact would be devastating because our project is focusing on three sectors: the creative sector, the catering sector and retailers. And the first two sectors in particular, creatives and catering, well, they've been absolutely devastated because of the pandemic. And if you sort of think about it for a minute, here are these businesses, perfectly viable, doing well in their own sort of circumstances, and through no fault of their own, they have no market the following day. And as I mentioned earlier in one of my responses, that many of these are family businesses. So it means much more than an economic activity. It's what families and communities, and you know that very well, Meryl, from your own background, how these businesses are sustained by the hard-earned emotional labour of families. and suddenly to have that wrenched away is a huge impact. So we thought initially the impact for our project would be quite devastating. But one of the things that we found, and I think this is a consequence of the fact that we've worked very closely with practitioners, which has enabled us to have a fair amount of trust with our businesses. We found that practitioners and businesses, as Imelda has quite rightly said, aren't as inward looking as some of the academics have argued in previous research. They're part of their communities. They want to make a difference. And because of the relationship we established with them, Meryl, they stepped up. They started saying to us, well, how can we work together? And that posed a real challenge, because if we were to adopt the perspective of detached researchers, we'd say, well, we're only here to do a survey, we're only here to interview you. But because our philosophy in our centre has always been to work alongside practitioners, what we effectively started doing is working as a team, academics and practitioners working as a team. And what that led to is 2 or 3 really, I suppose, humbling initiatives. I mean, the practitioners stepped up in the way that Imelda's already described. So in the creative sector, one of our practitioner partners, Punch Records, worked with us to convene a program of leadership support for creatives, which has resulted in some of these creatives winning business. At a minimum, they're supporting each other through a very lonely and precarious time. With the Bangladeshi caterer sector that we looked at, this perhaps is the most detached sector of the lot, but they got together and worked with us to put on a digital transformation program to look at the potential for pivoting in these organizations. And the retailers said, look, we want to support our communities. And so they set up their own group which we're helping to facilitate. Now, none of these initiatives were part of the research design at the start, but they're very much a part of the research philosophy that we're trying to cultivate, which is do the research, but do the research in a way that acknowledges the value of practitioner knowledge and empowers them at the same time.
Brilliant. Thank you. That sounds very, very interesting. I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure other goers at the conference will. And this is a paper that, and your research is something that I think, I for one certainly would be very interested in. So finally, just to round up, what do you think are the key insights from the CIPD from your work? And again, Monder, if I could ask you.
Right, 3 insights in particular. The first one, I think Imelda's already alluded to, and which is the unacknowledged appetite of micro businesses to get engaged with the CIPD's core business, which is people development. Just because they don't have management practices, formal recruitment procedures, appraisals, job evaluation, etc., doesn't mean they do that. They don't do those functions. They do them in a very different way, right? And the fact that they've stepped up during the time of the pandemic to get engaged, to find out more about leadership, for say. Mindset is so important to HR. They wanted to know about leadership. They wanted to know about supporting themselves. Even in the mainstream HR literature, there's a great acknowledgement of the process of social resource management. That's great, but they need to catch up with the micro businesses because they've been doing that all the time. So the first insight is we've got a lot to learn about the lived experience of micro businesses. The second thing, the second insight is we can only make sense of these practices if we look at these businesses as part of a network, part of what we call an ecosystem. These businesses, far from the sort of stylized academic view of these businesses being fortress enterprise, not interested in outside support, they support each other, and they've stepped up during the pandemic. So they're a part of a very intricate ecosystem that is self-sustaining, right? What we miss as academics and business support agencies is that knowledge of how these ecosystems work, right? And our engaged methodology is bringing that to the fore. And so what we found is that our practitioners partners who are co-investigators in our project are part of the ecosystem of these businesses. And so that leads to my third point is for the CIPD is get involved in these hidden ecosystems, be a part of these networks, because these businesses will value your knowledge. If you reach out, they'll be your allies in supporting workers in micro businesses. Surely that's what the CIPD want, because it's a huge market that is being effectively bypassed because of the rhetoric and management practices, formality that we see in larger organizations. People still have to be managed in micro businesses. We need to understand the dynamics that are relevant in micro businesses. What this project does is bring them to the fore, and the CIPD have a brilliant opportunity to be a part of these networks and to forge and prize open a new market.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you, and I look forward to seeing you both at the conference as well. Okay, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Meryl.
Bye then.
Thank you. Bye.